speakers for tonight. First, we have Ustadh Nouman, who is very well known to all of you. He's the founder of Baina Institute, and our Imam Zia Sheikh, who is the Imam of the Islamic Center of Irving. And so I'd like to begin with you, Brother Nouman. Assalamu alaikum. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us. And we would like you to just kind of give us an Islamic perspective on what does Islam really say about racism, about ethnocentrism, and what can we do as Muslims about these issues?
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ثم أما بعد. In the next 15 or so minutes, I'd like to share with you just a few reflections from the Quran that, in a sense, summarize the essence of what our deen teaches, what our religion teaches, in terms of shaping our perspective towards race, towards diversity. The first thing I'd like to start with is a very brief statement from Surah Al-Isra. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. No doubt it is we, in fact, Allah Himself, that honored the children of Adam. We believe that all human beings are children of Adam alayhi salam, and in that one sweeping statement, Allah has said that the nobility and dignity of all human beings is something granted by Allah. Human beings can be insulting towards each other, they can be condescending towards each other, they can be racist towards each other, they can be biased against one another. But in the sight of Allah, for one who has reverence for what Allah has said, you cannot take away something that Allah has given. And Allah has given honor to every single human being. Allah did not, in this particular ayah, make a distinction between races of people. He also didn't make a distinction between religions. All children of Adam, that includes Hindus and atheists, it includes Jews and Christians, it includes Muslims, it includes everybody. It includes the young and the old, it includes the people who speak your language or don't speak your language. So long as they are children of Adam, they have been given honor by Allah Azza wa Jal Himself. So that becomes and what Allah gives, we have to, this is the sunnah of Allah now. Something Allah Himself honored, how can we desecrate? Something Allah has given reverence to, how can we take it away? That's the first thing in the mind of every single Muslim that should penetrate. And as I go forward, I do want to say that a lot of times, what I'm going to share with you is not something you didn't already know. Probably all of you in one way or the other are familiar with these realities and these truths. The problem, however, is a lot of times these things remain theory, and practically we don't realize where we're violating them. Is it in our speech, our behavior, our action, in the way we look at someone, in the way we treat someone, but we don't even realize it's subconscious that we're not treating them as an equal. Maybe it's because of nationalistic lines, it's because of tribal lines, it's because of racial lines. There could be any one of these lines. It could be economic lines. There could be any one of these lines that violate that very basic tenet of Karramna Bani Adam. The second thing I want to share with you is something really peculiar Allah says about different cultures and societies. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. In Surah Al-Hujurat, which is actually a surah about the cohesion of the Muslim community within itself. How should Muslims behave towards each other is actually one of the fundamental, purposes of that surah. In the middle of it, Allah actually addresses all of humanity. Ya ayyuhan nas, which is peculiar because the Madani surah, a surah that was revealed after migration, the focus of it is actually the Muslim community. But Allah migrates from that focus in that one ayah and makes it a subject of the entirety of humanity, Ya ayyuhan nas. And that's significant. It's significant because the Muslims are supposed to solve these problems within themselves, and only then are they in a position to declare the word of Allah to the rest of humanity. Humanity may have a problem of racism, but if Muslims don't solve that problem for themselves first, they're in no position to speak to anybody else. So it's actually Allah's declaration in the middle of Muslims having to sort out their own issues that Allah says, humanity, addressing humanity, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى. We created all of you from a male and a female. Allah Azza wa Jal reduces all human beings to just a father and a mother, and that's it. That's all there is to it. مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ. I love this ayah. Allah didn't say aqwaman. Allah says it's translated commonly as we made you into nations and tribes. That's how they translate it. So Allah made us into nations and tribes so we may get to know one another. That's a rough translation of the ayah. But remarkably, the word shu'ub comes from the word sha'ab in the Arabic language. And the word sha'ab is shaqqun fil ha'it. It's a crack in the wall. It's an imperfection. And Allah is saying in a very articulate way that all nations have many great qualities and many things that bring them together, like bricks come together in a wall, but all nations have some imperfection.
No nation was given absolute perfection. They have something that they just have, there's a flaw. There's something there that's missing. And he says he made you all into nations, each of you having your own strengths. Each wall has many parts that are strong, and there's a part, there's a crack, there's a weakness. And he made you get to know each other, and he made you into tribes. And qaba'il, by the way, comes from qabil or qabil or qubayl, which is to come from before. In other words, your ancestries go back to one male and one female. They're reminding you that your origins are the same. So when you call someone a tribe, the English word tribe, which is actually the Arabic qabila, you're actually reminding them of their ancestry. And in this ayah, the ultimate ancestry is Adam and Hawa. So you're actually reminded of the original ancestry. But anyway, on this note of the wall having a crack, the idea in sum is that nations are supposed to interact with each other. People of different cultures are supposed to interact with each other. And when they do, they realize that part of their wall is way stronger where we're weak. You actually learn more about your own weaknesses and where you could learn from another society, another culture, and how they do things better than you do, just as they're learning some things about how you do certain things that they don't do. So it's actually an educational process where you get to learn more about your own weaknesses. Your own weaknesses is a discovery of yourself and the other, and that's one of the purposes for which Allah made nations dependent on each other, which is obviously manifest since the beginning of civilized society. Trade, economics, business, social interaction, cultural interaction, family ties that cross continents and cross oceans have always been there, now more than ever. We are more cross-cultural as a society in the world than we ever were before, and these ties continue to build and continue to build and continue to build. Right? So this is جَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. Now in this, of course, a great source of pride for people nowadays is the country they come from or the race they belong to. And they take pride in their ethnicity or their ancestry, their family. And at one level, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's the thing I'll talk about last. But for now, I want you to understand that a lot of times, people talk most about how great they are as a nation or a country or a people, usually in the face of clash against someone else. So patriotism is at an all-time high in times of war, or when you see conflict. As a matter of fact, I'm Pakistani, so I can talk about Pakistanis. Pakistanis are super proud of being Pakistani when there's a match against India in cricket. It's when there's a clash, all of a sudden the flag comes out. The rest of the time, all you do is complain about your country and how the government's messed up and how the sewage system doesn't work and the electricity isn't there. But when there is a clash, you guys are number one. All of a sudden. So it's actually about this self-esteem getting boiled up in face of what you see as someone opposed to you. Right? You get more patriotic or more fired up that they're out to get us. It's an us versus them kind of mentality. But Allah in this ayah says you don't have to protect your dignity by being insecure by the presence of another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Done deal. The most noble among you, as far as Allah is concerned, are the ones that have the most conscious of God, which means the ones that have the conscious of Allah in their hearts. The matter of nobility has, again, in the previous ayah in Surah Al-Isra, something Allah gives, and now the only one who knows where that nobility exists is Allah, because He's the one who gave it, and He's the one who sees whether you honor that nobility deep inside your hearts or not. So it's not a matter of us to judge who deserves more respect or less respect. Balillahi al-izzah. Allah Himself owns all dignity and respect. Right? That's the second thing I wanted to bring to your attention. The third, there's only four things I want to bring to your attention. The third thing I want to bring to your attention is وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. The Arabic word I want to highlight first here in this ayah from Surah Al-Rum is the word ayah itself. The word ayah is a miraculous sign of Allah. And Allah says those who deny or ignore or refuse to ponder on the ayat are committing a blasphemous crime. In other words, when we call something an ayah, this word ayah, then that, whatever that is, becomes sacredly important to us because an ayah is connected to our guidance. The ayat of Allah, the purpose of them is to guide you back to Allah. It brings you closer to Allah. It is something we revere. As a matter of fact, the verses of the Quran are called what? Ayat. They're sacred. Now Allah says, of the things that He has made sacred is اختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم, the differences in your languages, in your tongues, and He didn't even say languages, lughat, He said ألسنتكم, your tongues. In other words, even within English, the Texan has a different drawl than the New Yorker. Right? English is going to be different in Ireland than it's going to be in Scotland. Believe me, I've been there. It's going to be different. And even that, the dialect changes are actually a sign of Allah. Allah says it's a sign of Allah. وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ, and the colors of your skin. Your colors are a miraculous sign of Allah, which is to be revered. So when there is a culture in which lighter skin is superior to darker skin, or vice versa, there's a serious problem because people are, undermining ayat of Allah, not somebody's color of skin. This is actually a disregard of a miraculous sign of God, as far as we're concerned. So this is actually not a social problem or a cultural problem first. Fundamentally, to believers in Allah's revelation, this is a faith problem. This is actually a faith problem. It's a spiritual problem at its core. But of course, as we become more and more distant from our faith tradition, this is the last thing I want to share with you. As we become more and more distant from our faith tradition, less and less people reflect on the word of Allah and allow it to shape the way they view the world, then problems of ignorance that used to be there before the coming of revelation make surface again. So you have people that have revelation in their hands, but it hasn't made its way into their hearts. It hasn't changed the way they think. And then those cultural biases, they take over, and the religious teachings that are supposed to clean some of those cultural biases, they're not there to clean up the mess. So now on this last note, is Allah against culture? Let me just put it out bluntly. Is Allah against culture? The answer is no. The fact that Allah created diverse cultures and societies all over the world, and people having different languages, people having different dialects of different languages, this is actually a God-given gift. This is a gift of Allah that we have unique cultural identities. Our languages are different, the foods we like to eat are different, And so when I come from, for example, a very, before I moved to Texas, is so long ago now, but anyway, when I used to live in New York, it's a tough place to live. It's a very expensive place to live. So the Muslim community cannot imagine having a masjid this size that we have in Texas. You cannot imagine having this in New York City. So you have like basements of apartment buildings and old homes turned into a masjid and things like that, And what happens in New York as a cultural phenomenon? All the Greeks move to Astoria, or the Bangladeshis move to Steinway, or the Punjabis move to Jackson Heights, or the Chinese have taken over Flushing, and it's an ethnically concentrated pockets all over New York City, right? So when you have these concentrated pockets, you have this pocket of Muslims that are Indo-Pak, and they've got a masjid. Guess who's going to be in that masjid? Indo-Paks. You're going to go to Jersey City, there's a huge population of Egyptians, and guess what? All the khutbahs are going to be in Arabic, and actually on top of that Egyptian Arabic, and most of the people going to those masjids are going to be Egyptian. And that's actually not because they're racist, because that's their economic reality. They moved close to each other because they're not good at English yet, and they formed these mini ethnic communities. And that's not just the Muslims that do it. The Hindus are doing that, the Buddhists are doing that, everybody else is doing that too. That I don't consider racism. That's just a social reality. But there are other communities where the socioeconomic condition is not the same. For example, the community we live in the United States. There are people of very diverse backgrounds that are all attending the same masjid. They come from different cultures, and some of them have become Muslim here. Some of them are actually Hispanic or African American or Native American. They're different ethnicities. And they all belong to the same. Now what happens now is you can necessarily have a diverse or a clash of cultures. That is inevitable. You're not gonna, the uncle does not want to eat a hot dog for iftar. He wants to have his biryani. That's what he wants. The ammu wants his baklava. And the desi uncle wants his laddu. And there's going to be a clash. There's going to be people that eat differently, that hang out differently. They may even pray differently. That happens too. They pray differently. They celebrate differently. These cultural differences exist. We are now forced in this reality to not only understand that those cultural differences are not central to our identity. They are part of what makes you who you are, but they are not at the core of what makes you and me who we are. What makes us who we are is our Islam. That's the identity that binds us. And that bond is thicker than any culture, any dietary preference, any language preference. And as a result of it, we have to be as accommodating to each other as possible. While at the same time, you don't have to condemn your own culture. I'm not ashamed of being Desi. I really like being Desi. I'm super Desi. That's okay. I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. I have no problems with it. And at the same time, it's not something that keeps me from hanging out with my Arab friends or my African American friends or whatever. And this is not something that we're supposed to be ashamed of. We're not going to eradicate culture. Islam didn't come to eradicate culture. It only came to remove elements of culture that are harmful, that are actually, that protrude a certain kind of sense of superiority over others, or have ignorant practices associated with them. Other than that, this diversity is something that's part of the beauty of Islam and the beauty of the human creation, the creation of the human being, that Allah intended to be this way. So those are just a few reflections that I wanted to share with all of you. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah, brother, for those beautiful points and reminders.
وجب الشكر علينا ما دعا لله دا أيها المبعوث في